Welcome back, guys, to another wrap-up video, this time for July and August. This time, though, it's a little different than usual, because for these months, all of the books I read, well, save for one, were all sourced from my local public library. Partly because it was convenient to do so, but also because I've been furloughed from my job, so I'm trying to save a little money here and there since my employee discount doesn't work anymore. Not as many as last time, but I'm trying to get myself back into the regular video groove, so 2 months feels like a good amount of time between videos. The first book I read was The Adventures of Superman by George Lowther, for obvious reasons of the recent James Gunn Superman movie coming out, which has the distinction of being the first full-length novel to feature Superman on the heels of the wildly popular comic strip and subsequent Fleischer cartoons and radio serial. Debuting in 1942, only 4 years after Superman's 1938 debut in Action Comics #1. It's the classic Superman origin story, and actually codified a lot of the elements that were used in subsequent adaptations. There was a little of Kal-El's origins from Siegel and Shuster on the pages of Action Comics and his first solo series, but Lowther came up with a lot of the familiar elements. Jor-El and Lara, Clark's childhood with the Kents, good old Ma and Pa Kent, Sarah and Eben. Huh? No, I actually didn't misspeak. Jonathan and Martha didn't become their names for another decade. Lowther had to come up with his own names. In any case, they ended up using those names in the 1948 movie serial with Kirk Alyn, and then again in the TV series starring George Reeves. He also first posited, unlike the comics at the time, that Clark's abilities manifested over time during childhood, as opposed to baby Clark lifting furniture, another element that persisted in the future origin stories, including the first big revamp post-Crisis on Infinite Earths. That being said, it's unlikely, given that this book has been mostly out of print outside of facsimile editions published in the 90s, like this one, that John Byrne used it as inspiration for the post-Crisis origin. But just like the Cybermen, parallel evolution. Anyway, this is all to say that this book is fascinating for its place in history, and how it's bog standard now, but was at one point the only place that a lot of these familiar elements existed for the general audiences, in a tie-in novel. Let me know if you want me to do a deep dive on the history of tie-in novels, cause it's pretty interesting, and could make for its own video. But yeah, most of Superman's pop culture osmosis power came from this old book. Pretty neat, huh? It's the classic story. Krypton is doomed, and Jor-El sends his infant son to Earth in order to save him, and after growing up, gets a job at the Daily Planet, and meets Lois Lane. It's nothing to write home about, but it reads exactly like the Kirk Alyn serials. Get the origin out of the way, and then Superman gets embroiled in a plot involving a villain. In this case, Nazi saboteurs, because it was the 40s. And if you want to know where Superman started, it's definitely a good way to do that. It was definitely written more for kids, the general target audience of comic books, but not in that middle grade way that authors write now. It's simple enough to understand, and it's goofy as hell sometimes. But we all have to start somewhere, and Superman novels started right here. It's a change from the norm for me, but this one actually only gets 3 stars. And I know that's weird. I mean, it's Superman. I said I liked it. But if you look at ratings from the perspective of others like it, this is the ultimate average of a Superman origin, given that all of the other ones spring forth from it. The good ones and the bad ones. It's worth it to read if you can track down a copy of it, though mostly for its place in the hallowed history of Superman, my second favorite superhero. Next up in my reading list was Bright Young Women by Jessica Knoll. I've had my eye on this one for a few years now, at least since it's been in hardcover. I saw it all the time at work. I work in the bookstore, if you don't know, and it was on the new release shelf, and then again on table after table when it was in paperback, because it was selling well, and the title drew me in because I always kept mixing it up with the title of that Carey Mulligan movie, Promising Young Woman, plus the fact that the cover has a very 70s vibe, which, if you know me, you know I dig. So now I finally read it. The book itself was nothing like I expected. I specifically didn't really poke through it or read the blurb. I read it based on vibes. So I didn't realize that it was actually rather similar to another book that drew me in based on the cover and title that I showcased a few videos ago, A Gorgeous Excitement by Cynthia Weiner, being a fictionalization of a real-life true crime case. That one was the preppy killer, and this one was Ted Bundy. They never refer to him by name, but it's pretty obvious. The premise is as follows. A young woman, Pamela, witnesses a strange man leaving her sorority house in Florida and then discovers that two of her sorority sisters are dead and everything that follows such a brutal attack and trying to get justice for her friends. The narrative is split into three distinct tracks, the first being Pamela in the modern day, several decades removed from the events being dragged back into it by being summoned back to Florida by a mysterious person who claims to have information regarding the tragedy that she's been seeking since it happened. The second is Pamela in media res during the events of the murders, manhunt, and subsequent trial. The third follows Ruth, the previous victim prior to Pamela's sorority house, whose backstory factors into Martina Cannon's, aka Tina, who befriends Pamela as they both lost someone special to the defendant, as they refer to him. It was a solid read, and there were points I was on the edge of my seat, although I think some other plot points petered out too quickly, and the ultimate resolution as to the identity of the mysterious summoner was a tad anticlimactic. That's why I'm only giving it 4 stars, because it was an above-average read, but a tad clunky at times. I like that triple narrative structure it had, which made it interesting, similar to those prestige TV shows that drop a big reveal and then immediately follow it up with an episode that focuses only on backstory, except that I had control over the timing of how fast I got back to the main plot. What really pushed me to rate it so highly was actually how much it bucks against the trends and derails a lot of the glamorization of serial killers that the genre of true crime has created. The third and final book on our journey is Erasure by Percival Everett, another book that I've been wanting to read for a while, at least since I saw the trailer for American Fiction, which was adapted from it, and I just kept putting it off, never buying it, and it wasn't until one of my friends from work told me that they got it from the library that it clicked that I could just do that, since I've been waiting ages for the author's most recent book, James, from the library too, so I finally checked it out, and it was incredible. So much deeper than I could have imagined, only having known the broad strokes from the trailer for the movie, that it was about a black author fed up with what he sees as exploitative drivel about the black experience, writing his own satirical, parodistic version, which inevitably for these types of stories becomes a huge runaway success despite him and all that comes from it. Which the fact that they managed to get all that into a 2-minute trailer is impressive, since I deliberately didn't seek out any more information about it because I wanted to read it organically. What I didn't know was that it was also a deep story about the main character, Thelonious Monk Ellison, taking care of his ailing mother as she develops Alzheimer's, coping with the death of his sister Lisa, and how it causes him to re-examine his relationship with his brother, all the while dealing with all the stuff about my pathology, the book he writes as a reaction to his deep, meaningful, yet wholly uncommercial stuff being spurned for not being black enough, while exploitative schlock climbs the bestseller charts. I really wonder how the film adaptation, which I haven't seen yet, will deal with all those interlocking pieces while fitting in a 2-hour runtime. I really can't wait to find out. I tore through this one, my eyes only glazing over during the bits that show Monk's dense, uncommercial writing that even the other characters in the book say that they had a hard time reading. I can definitely see why it was adapted into a movie that was up for Best Picture, and why it ultimately won Best Adapted Screenplay. Although I wonder honestly why it took Hollywood so long to make it, given that the book came out in 2001. But I do think that the film was probably helped by coming out after Precious, which was itself based on a novel Push, which seemed to be one of the books that Monk was deliberately aping in his novel within a novel, so then the filmmakers had the knowledge of that movie's success to build off of in retelling Monk's story, and that the audiences had knowledge of it too. If anything, this has convinced me even more that I want to read James, itself being another exploration, being a retelling of Huck Finn, centering on the character of Jim, which I really wanted to read already just based on premise alone. Naturally, given how long I've talked about it, I'm giving this one 5 stars, and honestly I may have found a new favorite author in Percival Everett. And that does it for this wrap-up. A bit on the shorter side, but I think that I'm out of my slump, so hopefully I'll be reading a lot more. So I'll have more for you next time. Just started The Running Man ahead of the new movie, and my holds list at the library grows by the day. So expect another video, probably in October or November. See you next time.
Yo, Holmes, what up? What up with you? What we gonna say? What we gonna do? Where we gonna go? What we gonna see?
We're going to the library. I'm moving down the aisle with my homies in tow. We're grooving in the home of the librarian. Yo. She checks us out from behind thick glasses. We walk right past and we wiggle our asses.